What is going on? I want to welcome you from half court for today, Wednesday, November 23rd, 2022. I am your host, Sean Murphy, alongside my boy, Jeff Iafredi. My man, good to see you as always, brother.
Oh, good to see you guys too, man. I'm excited. I know the Pistons haven't won a road game, but listen,
Feels
still
like they
plenty.
haven't won a game in a while, Jeff.
Well, that's very true, Sean. Not a lot of winning, but still, last night in Sacramento, shootout, absolute shootout. No defense being played, but this is where we are right now, Sean. This is where we
Mm-hmm.
are.
We are in the dog days, my friend, but it's never feeling like a dog day when we're joined by this guy. It is my friend, Troy Survey. Troy, do you ever get sick of that?
No, not really. Not when it's coming from your mouth, Sean.
Well, I appreciate
Wait, hold up. Hold up.
Yeah,
Hold up. Pause. Anyway. No, I'm kidding.
Resume.
yeah. Doing good on this end. I was just telling you guys before we hit the record button. Best road game of the year yesterday against the Kings. I know we came up short. I know, Jeff, you mentioned, but it's kind of a tale of two teams who didn't know how to play defense in some fashions. But at the end of the day, we saw development on the offensive end by a lot of our guys, especially Ivey and Duren too. Our two rookies was the big things that I like to see yesterday, and I got to see it. So, absolutely, I'm sure there's things to be concerned about, but for the end of the day, I am very happy with the direction of this team, even if the record box doesn't show it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to talk about that direction of this team because this is From Half Court Reach, and every week we talk all things NBA basketball, but we have a focus on our Detroit Pistons. If you like that, sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel and share the podcast with your friends and join in the conversation down below. Also, be sure you follow all of us on social media so you can join us in the conversation on other platforms. You can follow myself at Sean Half Court. You can follow my guy Jeff at Jeff Iafredi, and you can follow my boy Troy at Troy Sergey 44. But with that, gentlemen, let's talk NBA basketball. Let's talk Detroit Pistons. Let's discuss everything going on in the world of Pistons land. Because at its current point, I would say that we have reached the darkest days of the restoration. I don't mean that in the sense that I don't think there's anything to be doomed and gloomed about. I don't think there's anything to be overly afraid of, but I would say rather we're in probably the least fun stages of the rebuild to date, just because of what news was broken earlier this week, according to Shams, and confirmed and backed by every Pistons beat writer, and now even announced by the team. Cade Cunningham will be missing an indefinite time due to a feared stress fracture in his shin. The Detroit Pistons are currently at this point 3-15, and currently are in a situation now where they've lost 7 in a row. They are still searching for their first road win. And even though games are getting closer and closer, even though young guys are playing better and better, there's a lot of people calling for jobs, calling for change. And I think we've addressed this quite a bit on this pod, so I don't really feel like retreading that conversation. Just because at this time I don't think there's any reason to give it energy. However, what I do want to talk about is both what reasons we can be optimistic, but also what things have you concerned. Because I think there is reason to feel both ways, right? Like, even though, like, I think they're playing really good basketball. I think Jaden, Ivey, and Jalen Duren have both, shown a lot of signs of development. I think there's a lot of improvement. This team still hasn't really shown a whole lot defensively, and I think that is a problem. Jeff,
Yeah.
or with you, where are you at with this team currently? What are your thoughts, and what do you want to see change?
Well, I'll start with the things that have been encouraging, and no doubt you've already kind of hit it on it. It's player development, right? I mean, for Ivey and Duren to get the opportunities they've gotten, and a lot of that frustration honestly has to do with the fact that this team hasn't been healthy together. I mean, you're waiting on Bagley and Burks to get here, and then you lose Isaiah Stewart, you lose Cade. So again, this team really hasn't had an opportunity to be able to grow and play with an entire healthy lineup. but you've liked what you've seen out of the young guys. You've liked how, the additions like a Bojan Bogdanovic, how the impact he's had, being really playing some of his best basketball of his career. There's a lot of things to look forward to, especially for the future. Things that have frustrated me, though. To be honest with you, I guess a lot of frustration has to do with the fact that I wanted to see Cade and Ivey for an entire season. Now you don't really have that anymore. From a coaching standpoint, there's been things that have frustrated me from Dwayne Casey, but again, that's in context of 15 games. That also is in context of Dwayne, again, not having an entire healthy lineup. That's also in context with the fact that you're relying on 2 young guards, now 1 young guard, really, or at least to be the dude. I mean, Killian's a young guard, but his role and Jaden Ivey's role are just completely different. So again, that's frustrating to see. You'd like Dwayne to be given all of those resources. But from Dwayne's perspective, just to hit on last night for that Sacramento game, what frustrated me in that game, especially down the stretch, is 2 things. One, and this isn't, doesn't always have to be on Dwayne. It could be, young guards deferring, but Bojan handling the ball late, in the game. That frustrated me. I think he ended the game with like 5 turnovers. I don't want to see Bojan. I know he's our best player technically, but in those situations, you just give the ball to Ivey and get out of the way. Like, that's what I want to see. But again, you don't know if Ivey was deferring, letting Bojan take the ball up. If anything, if that's what happened, you want Ivey to be like, give me the ball right now. But again, I'm not going to say that's Dwayne's fault. But what I didn't like that was more so on Dwayne is putting Bagley at center, like in the last minute or 2 of the game, and really banking on him getting those offensive rebounds, really playing defense on these guys, and knowing Bagley isn't the best defender, especially interior. His defense around the basket just isn't what you like from a 5-man. Now he's a true 4. I know he's 6'11". He has really all the measurables to be a 5. He just isn't. And that's what frustrated me. I'd like to see Duren down the stretch, but again, am I nitpicking? Probably. They still had one of their better offensive performances. It really comes down to those points could have been prevented earlier in the game. To have a shootout like that late in the game, if you want to nitpick, go ahead. But those are the things that have frustrated me, really. It's not too much because, again, it is a rebuild. Like, it's hard to nitpick a team that you expected to be bad.
Well, and there's legitimate criticisms there, I think. I think, in my opinion, like, listen, there's no coach that's going to be perfect. I think playing Jalen Duren, over Marvin Bagley should have been the move against Sacramento. I'm not going to disagree with that at all. I also am not going to call for somebody's job off of one decision made in November in the middle of a rebuild. So I think the other piece of it too is that you have to look at this from a big picture. And I think especially, I think we're at the point now. I said at the beginning of the season, if you kept playing this way, then my argument was just not going to be there to argue against this anymore. And Troy, I think I'm at that point. I think Jalen Duren's got to start. I think he's got to start this week.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think just his aggressiveness too on the offensive end too has been what's impressive me. And we know the guy could play defense. We know the guy is a true big man in this league as far as his physicality around the rim on both ends of the spectrum. But I feel like he's a guy that brings the energy when, I just don't really like Bagley, I guess, at that 5 role, like Jeff mentioned. I think the more traditional 4 is what we should be looking at him as far as a realistic role. But I feel like Duren has proved himself already because of he's a smart basketball player too. Yeah. And you don't really see that a lot at guys his age. He knows how to play the game. And for me, I feel like even though he's a young guy, even though he's a rookie, even though he has a lot to learn, he helps this team too with his basketball IQ. And there's just so much to touch on with Jalen Duren, but and just
he's gonna come out of high school.
Right. And to just summarize, your first question to Jeff then too, for me, the losses become a little easier when we see the production and the player development that we're seeing with these younger guys. Especially Killian too. I know we talked about him last week too, but he had a great game last night against Sacramento as we're recording.
Well, I mean, the other difference is last time we talked about it, it was a 1 or 2 game sample size.
Sure.
Now we have a little bit more of a significant sample size to say that Killian Hayes has been playing good basketball of late. In fact, it's almost getting to the point where he's been playing good basketball for almost, almost like a third of the season. It's going to get to the point where the good games are going to outweigh the bad games. And, especially if he keeps heading in the, at this pace. So since Since the first Boston game, which is the last game that Cade's played in, Killian Hayes has averaged 11 points, 4.7 assists, 3 rebounds on 42% from the field, 42% from beyond the arc. That's significant improvement over where he was. And we've always said if Killian could just be even just a 10-5 guy with the defense that he brings, that's value. And so if he keeps heading in that direction, Killian Hayes could be a damn good player. And especially his performance, against the Lakers, in my opinion, was his best game of his professional career.
Yeah.
That was a fun one to watch.
Yeah, and I think another thing you could take away from it is, yes, the injuries aren't good. And I think Troy hit on it already. When you see the player development, it makes these losses a little easier to swallow. And given the opportunity that Killian, Jaden Ivey, hell, even Duren with Isaiah Stewart going out, these guys getting all of the opportunities, all of the touches in the season where you don't really have much expectations. I think that's the best case scenario, right? Like this is going to help them, I think, develop. For Killian, it's hard when he's playing 10 to 15 minutes to truly know. And now you throw him in the starting lineup. He's playing significant minutes. He's in a much more significant role. That's great to see for a lot of these guys. So I think that's been another positive is putting these guys right, throwing them right out, into the fire and seeing how they respond. And so far, I know the wins aren't there. Their individual statistics, they've responded. So that's another good thing to look for with these guys going out.
Yeah, for sure. And listen, there's still moments and there's still a lot of areas that Jalen Duren has to grow. I think his offensive game is still insanely raw. I don't think that's a secret. I think the when he's been at his best is when he's been on the receiving end of lobs and when he's been getting second chance opportunities at the rim with his rebounding and his ability to stuff it up in the rim. And a lot of people are giving him the Andre Drummond comparisons because, they're certainly there as far as the potential that he brought, the youth that he had, the athleticism, like the archetype and the potential that Andre Drummond represented. Right. But I think, the difference is how insanely committed he is to the defensive end from day one. The head, like the head that he's bringing in between, what he has between his ears compared to what Andre had. You guys got to remember when Andre Drummond was drafted, the questions about him weren't his talent. They were his passion. They were his mentality. They were his commitment to the game. No one's questioning that with Jalen Duren. No one's questioning if Jalen Duren's bringing it on a night-to-night basis.
And those questions are still being asked of Drummond, by the way.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, he's playing pretty well in Chicago right now, but he's a backup big when he shouldn't be. Right? Like let's just call it the way it is. So like obviously Andre Drummond, like at the peak of his powers, is still a damn good NBA player. So it's not an insult to compare to that by any means. But I think, in my opinion, I've seen more and more of the Dwight Howard with him every time he stepped on the court. And I'm just, every time I watch him play, I know he's being considered as one of the steals of this draft for good reason. And it's just another feather on the cap for Troy Weaver. It really is.
Yeah, the guy has incredible ball instincts. Like we went to the first game, the home opener, and you saw the impact he had right away. His first NBA game, bright lights. He's 18 years old, now 19. He just turned 19 recently, and you just saw the impact immediately. Like it was crazy to see for someone his age with, like you said, Sean, raw offensive ability, defensively. I mean, the guy is going 110% all the time, and the second chance points he's helped provide the Pistons as of late. I mean, the way he's trending, you're going to start having that conversation. Even at 19, is he your starting center? Especially with Isaiah Stewart out. Like he's been definitely one of the bright spots of this team so far, especially a team that's needed someone like Duren with that size, his defensive presence. He fits a huge hole on this team from last year.
Yeah, for sure. Now listen, the wins are still going to be few and far between. This team still has a lot of areas where they got to grow and get better. However, part of that's just getting guys back in the lineup. Part of that is them just learning how to play together and learning how to win together.
Yep.
Part of it is they just need some luck to go their way too, because it's just been, you want to talk about Murphy's Law, like whatever can go wrong will go wrong. That's been the start of their season so far, right? So I think, I ultimately, this season was always about development. This season was always about being competitive and seeing where we can be. And even though it might not look like it in the win column right now, this team's looked way more competitive over the last 2 weeks than they did at the beginning of the season. They really have.
Mhm.
So
And that's what we want. We want those
Yeah.
competitive games. And really, if you remember 2 years ago, Sadiq Bey and Isaiah Stewart's rookie year, a lot of the games, as far as what you watch, the competitiveness is similar. Now, you could make the argument too that we're 2 years into the restoration from those days. We should be seeing better basketball played. But I would argue in some ways we are. It's just the league's getting deeper. Our opponents are getting better, and we have to catch up.
Yeah, well, even then too, just like the composition of the team has changed. Back then, like especially like that rookie year with Sadiq and Isaiah Stewart, those rookies certainly had roles, but they were more limited in context. Whereas guys like Jeremy Grant did a lot of the heavy lifting those years, which you could say Boyan certainly is taking heavy lifting on the offensive end, but he's certainly not doing on the defensive end
Yeah,
what Jeremy Grant did. But in addition, these guys are year 3 guys. They're running the show now. There's no questions. Like this is their team. So, I think, there are ways where this team is different than that team. And there are ways where this team has grown from then. And I know it's hard to see, especially when it's frustrating to watch your team lose on a night to night basis. Of course, of course it's tough to tune in and watch them consistently lose. But again, this isn't really a bad season to be losing games when we talk about what's looming in the lottery, whether it's a Victor Wembanyama, whether it's literally anyone else, because this is supposed to be one of the best draft lotteries of all time beyond Victor Wembanyama. So just saying, whatever you get in this draft lottery is going to help your team going forward. So, and that we talk about the cap space again, that's going to be coming as well. You're in good shape, man.
Big time.
Yeah.
Big time.
Especially in a deep Eastern Conference, in the fact that, I mean, quite frankly, the team currently constructed, it's not complete. It's far from it. So there's plenty of work to do. And if you look at the schedule too to start the season, I mean, they played one of the tougher schedules in the NBA for a young team. I mean, you had Milwaukee back-to-back, Golden State, which they won, but still Atlanta back-to-back. I mean, it was no joke.
And these aren't excuses. This is just the reality of the situation.
They're good teams. Like,
Yeah.
that's not an excuse. I mean, but it is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. But another thing in Pistons land, guys, this was a really interesting tweet that came out yesterday. Stanley Johnson, former Detroit Piston lottery pick, was asked about his thoughts on the Detroit Pistons, on his thoughts on the current stage of the rebuild, and if he thinks his career would have gone differently if he was drafted with this group. And he said, yes, I think the group is amazing. Casey's amazing. Everything over there is great. We just didn't figure it out. I'm 26. I'd love to right the wrong. Detroit loved on me crazy. The organization did too. I had a lot of growing up and trauma to deal with at 18, 19.
Hey, check out that comment section, by the way, because your boy's in there advocating, trying.
There we go.
Yeah, man, you're tampering. You're trying to
Troy.
Oh yeah, we got people just trying to make this happen. And listen, I would love to see Stanley Johnson get another opportunity at the right time with this team, right? I would love to see Stanley Johnson continue to get second chances in this league, because when he has, especially his time with the Lakers last year, he was sensational. So at points, he was one of their better players
when they needed him to be last year.
Yeah. And and listen, I think that there's a lot of things that we don't know about what happened. We can only talk about what we see from our side, right? We have no idea what Stanley Johnson went through mentally, spiritually, emotionally. We have no idea what that journey's like, being a lottery pick coming into the NBA and all that stuff, right? But guys, also at the same time, the Pistons can just focus on going forward. And we can say both can be true, that we wish Stanley Johnson nothing but the best. But at the same time, I don't know where he'd get to playing time in this team right now. Is he playing over Bay? Is he playing over Livers? Is he playing over Diallo? Is he playing over Kevin Knox even?
Yeah. No, probably not. And I think a lot of me commenting and at least trying to get Stanley to join the Detroit Pistons is I've always loved his intensity defensively. Like the Pistons,
his initial intensity defensively.
That's
guarding LeBron in the playoffs.
But with Stanley, I know there's always question marks, especially for Stanley being a shooter. That was never his strong suit. That's probably the most necessity, the most needed thing with this current team. But I don't know, man. I just would love Stanley Johnson, what he brings, the mindset. I think for a young team like this, I would love it to have Stanley at the forefront, talking all that trash, taking on some of the better players. I wouldn't mind it, but you're right, Sean. I mean, the more you think about it, where's he playing in the rotation? I don't know, but I would love for him to at least have a roster spot. I mean, it's not like he'd command any money. I mean, it'd be like a minimum deal for a guy like Stanley, but we'll see. Maybe if injuries arise, maybe there's an opportunity for that.
Yeah. And listen, that currently, as currently constructed, the team doesn't have any available roster spots. They don't have any available two-way contracts at this time. The only way they would get that type of thing, like you said, is if there was, some form of injury compensation or some form of injury, reverting there. But Troy, I want to get your thoughts as well on, Stanley Johnson, and would you welcome him back, and under what circumstances?
Yeah, of course I would. I think that era, though, of Pistons basketball is a unique one because you could make the argument of, yay, he represented a time where we did make the playoffs that one year in 2016. Got swept by the Cavs, who went on to win the championship that year. And we saw some production out of him, and we saw some growth. He was kind of a streaky guy, though, really on the offensive end, I thought. He had even some stints where you and I, Sean, when we early on in our friendship, we were talking about how we think this guy's playing like a G League player at times. So, he can't be playing like that if he's ever on this roster, as far as like you said, the depth that we have, even at his position. Not that these guys, not that Kevin Knox is an all-star or anything like that, or Isaiah Livers is going to be an all-star. But where I'm saying is you want those guys to grow, and you would hate to take away playing time for a guy who's now a veteran, really, in Stanley Johnson. But also, we
26
traded
years
him.
old at this point.
Right. But you have to understand, too, we traded him for Thon Maker because we thought Thon Maker could have brought better energy on the defensive end and even better production on the offensive end. So that in itself, too, should show you our thoughts on Stanley Johnson at the time of his departure.
And listen, a lot of that, too, when you talk about his player development, let's remember who was in charge at that time, Stan Van Gundy. He made the decision to put Stanley Johnson at the shooting guard position in his sophomore season and to have him focus more on his offensive game, when in reality, what he was doing on defense was perfect. And if he just focused on that, in my opinion, Stanley Johnson could have been a Tony Allen type defender that we would have looked back on like, man, you wouldn't want to get guarded by Stanley Johnson that night.
Yeah.
Instead, out of the league. And that's the thing about a lot of these mid-round lottery guys, man. It's a total coin flip. It really is.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, you don't want to be in a phone booth with Stanley Johnson. I mean, we can get that out of the way. But to your point, that's kind of the story of Stanley Johnson, is floating around the league, not finding a consistent role. Even how well he played in LA, you'd think he'd have a job by now. Like, that kind of speaks to where the league's moving. There's just especially at the wing position, there's a certain thing that every team will ask of you that Stanley just isn't good at. I mean, defensively, yes, there's some upside there, but you just never really saw an expanded offensive game for teams to really give him significant minutes. Now, he played well with the Lakers, but not good enough to come back with the Lakers. So, it is what it is. Well, I personally, I wouldn't hate it. I think you could make an argument. I know Kevin Knox played well against Sacramento. We'll see how that trends. I think you could probably make a case. You can make a case. I would rather see Stanley over Kevin Knox.
But even then, when we're getting to the brass tacks of that argument, who gives up?
You're getting to the bottom of the bottom here. Yeah.
To the bottom of the roster. And listen, in all seriousness, if the team was interested in bringing him back, like I said, I think we would all welcome it.
Right.
It's just, with the right lens, with the right expectations, and who knows, maybe it could be like a thing where Lance Stevenson comes back to Indiana and he has a resurgence because that's where he thrived, right? Like maybe that could be a thing for him. Maybe he would have that renewed energy if he came back to Detroit, but also at the same time, it's just probably not going to happen. So why even talk about it? Anyway, From Half Court is brought to you by Manscaped. When we talk about post players, there is few better players in the restricted area than our friends over at Manscaped. With great products such as the Lawnmower 4.0 with skin-safe technology, the Weed Whacker, their deodorants, lotions, and more, Manscaped is unrivaled when it comes to the men's hygiene game, serving over 8 million balls worldwide. That's a lot of testicles, ladies and gentlemen. So if you're finding yourself in need of Manscaped products, be sure to go to manscaped.com and use code HALFCOURT at checkout, because that can get you 20% off plus free shipping. Our friends at Manscaped sent us these products, and I can tell you that they are absolutely for real. I have been absolutely satisfied and in love with their entire product line, from boxers, t-shirts, the Lawnmower 4.0 to the Weed Whacker ear and nose trimmer. You can really not go wrong. Be sure to go to manscaped.com and use code HALFCOURT at checkout for 20% off plus free shipping. Thank you again to our friends at Manscaped for sponsoring this video. Let's talk more NBA basketball, guys. Before we get into like specifics and get into teams and like talk a little bit more, like, because we always got to talk all things NBA. You know what I mean? We always start the pod with Pistons. We get into everything else, right? The thing that's been really weird about this season, we talked about the parity coming into the season, right? I honestly couldn't tell you who I think's going to win the Western Conference right now. I don't know. I don't have an answer, because there's like you could legitimately go down this list. Let's pull up the standings courtesy of NBA.com as of recording on Monday, November 21st, because we do record this on Monday night. Here's the current standings of the Western Conference. Utah Jazz. Are you telling me that you're picking Utah to go to the finals?
I'm not.
Are you looking me in the eyes telling me the Jazz are even going to be in the playoffs?
I'm also not.
The Phoenix Suns, that could blow up any moment.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Paul has been a shell of himself.
But also could work out at any moment.
It is true. Portland, they could boom, they could bust. They're a Yusuf Nurkic injury away from being a play-in team.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, Yusuf Nurkic is not necessarily sturdy. What the is going on in Denver? With Jamal Murray, we're still waiting for him to get back to himself. Michael Porter Jr. hasn't looked like the guy that they paid that max contract to.
Mm-hmm.
Jokic has been great.
But he's always great.
KCP and Bruce Brown are awesome. This team could go to the Western Conference final. This team could go to the finals.
Easily.
This team could be out in the first round.
Yeah. I'm holding the stock on Denver. I'm not selling it yet. I think the teams that are probably the most surprising, at least to me, are 7 through 10.
Yeah,
Mhm.
big
That's
Big
the
time.
most surprising. I mean, LA 10-7, okay. Kawhi hasn't been there really
Jeff,
at all.
before the season, the Clippers, you were talking about them going to the finals.
Yes, I like the Clippers now. I didn't know Kawhi would, still kind of be lingering, having soreness in his knee, but it is what it is. We'll see how they trend towards the end of the season. But I think the Pelicans.
Jeff, I don't blame you for not foreseeing him just coming back for one game and then just missing the next 14. We didn't have that on our bingo card.
No,
I don't blame you.
I don't believe I did. But I'll tell you what. Pelicans, Sean.
Mhm.
I got to give you some credit here because I know they're 8. They're the 8 seed right now. I can see the Pelicans being in that top 6 picture by the end of the year. I mean, even maybe if you want to say top 5, they're trending upwards.
They're
I like
legit,
the New Orleans
man.
Yeah, they are. They're deep too. They go
Number 5 looks good too, guys.
Okay, well,
But here's the weird part. Because here's the thing:
well.
you want to give the Kings their flowers, right?
Yeah.
They started the season 0-6. It's like, yeah, this team's doing great. They also have just gotten all of their wins in the last 10 games, pretty much.
They have a lot of different options too in Sacramento, man. It's like they got like 5, 6, 7 dudes who are averaging like double-digit points. So
right, but also this franchise doesn't even know what the word playoffs means.
Right.
They have to get the dictionary out. It's been so long since they've been there. We got to remind them what the it even is.
Let's talk about 9 and 11, though.
Wow, Troy.
No pun intended.
I'm kidding. Anyway, I'm kidding. But yeah, let's talk about the bottom here.
Yeah.
The Dallas Mavericks. Luka, it seems like Luka's a little bit out of gas, right?
Yeah. That's
It
it.
looks like
That's a good way to put it.
it looks like Luka, he can only do so much. It seems like Eurobasket put a lot on him. It seems like he's just played an unprecedented amount of basketball over the
Yeah.
last 2 years.
You know what, Sean? I got to get my, I got to sprinkle in a little petty here. I would be wrong if I didn't. It seems like the Dallas Mavericks need another ball handler. I mean, they're missing their guy Jalen Brunson, and again, for all those that believe, and you know who you are, how to win a championship is you put the ball in one person's hands and they'll lead you to the promised land. That ain't just how it works anymore. You need guys, multiple guys who can handle the ball. And I think Luka's missing Jalen Brunson a lot, man. I think you put it perfectly. He's running out of gas already. It's a tough ask for him. I mean, it really is.
Yeah, Spencer Midwitty ain't quite Jalen Brunson. You know what I'm saying?
No, he's nice, but no, he's not. No.
Yeah, and then you get down to the Minnesota Timberwolves, which we've talked about them a little bit. Literally, their starting lineup is the worst lineup statistically in the entire league. And also, through 125 possessions, Anthony Edwards only passed to Rudy Gobert once. Rudy Gobert somehow has a teammate that passes to him less than Donovan Mitchell did. How? How did it get worse?
We saw this coming from a mile. You could even say 10 miles, 15 miles, 20 miles away. I mean, we really did.
But then you get down here, and this is the biggest point of them all. The Warriors and Thunder are in the same spot. They're literally the same team. You have one guard that's playing at superstar level, surrounded by a team that's mid. Like literally, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is playing amazing basketball right now.
Oh yeah, he is.
Steph Curry's playing MVP level basketball right now.
Yeah.
Name one other guy on both teams that's playing well right now. Clay had one good game.
Okay.
I guess the only way to put it is Golden State has that another level, but as of right now, you're right. I mean, both of those teams are struggling around their superstar guards. I mean, they
so
really
that brings it to the entire landscape of this entire conference. I know it's early. And I know, generally speaking, you don't look at who's leading in the clubhouse at the beginning of the season. You're looking at who's leading in the clubhouse at the end of the season.
Right.
However, guys, if we're talking about what's going on right now, I don't know of a time this early, like at this point in the season, where we've had this little clarity about who's going to be contending and who's going to be playing basketball in May and June.
Yeah. No, it hasn't been this, at least unexpected, right? I mean, usually you'll see teams that we expect to be good, even if they start off slow, they're still in the picture. For Golden State to not have a road win, and I don't know if I think they just won on the road recently. That was like their first road win. And for Golden State to be in that position, for the Lakers, I didn't think they'd be very good. We kind of already talked about that before, but for them to be 5-10, really bottom of the West, already a West that's not very good in Portland. I mean, there's so many things in the West that's happening. It really speaks to the difference between the East and the West, and really the strength of contenders. I think the East, the champions coming out of the East, in my opinion. I think you would all agree with me there.
Yeah.
So it really speaks to how deep the East is, man. I mean, really.
Speaking of that, let's talk a second about because you hit it right on the head. I think the two contenders right now are in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah.
And I think it's the Celtics, I think it's the Bucks, and I think it's everybody else.
Yep.
And obviously the Boston Celtics, they've been great on both ends of the court. Jason Tatum has been phenomenal. Jaylen Brown's been phenomenal. Like everything that they've been doing on the court has been quite impressive, especially with everything they've been dealing with behind closed doors, especially the Ime Udoka story just being a lingering thing with the Nets situation coming back up, like essentially finding out that your old head coach almost got another job with your biggest rival, like right in the middle of your season, and then going on like an 8-game win streak during that. That's pretty impressive. But also, the Milwaukee Bucks, guys, a couple days ago, the Bucks were 28th in offensive rating in the NBA. They're 11-3. They're 11-4. They're first in defensive rating. And then when Giannis needs to get him over the hump, he's Giannis, so he can get him over the hump.
Yeah.
And this team, for the most part, and here's the crazy thing, they still are without Chris Middleton. They still haven't entirely had, Grayson Allen available in the lineup at times. Wesley Matthews has been dealing with some stuff. Joe Ingles still isn't entirely back in the lineup. We don't even have their full team currently constructed yet. They're already first in defense. They're not good offensively, but they're still 11-4. Like, how are they not the favorites right now?
And just wait till Chris gets back and
Right.
100% healthy.
They are. I think the question is yes, Sean. I think Giannis keeps getting better too.
Well, like again, as great as Boston is, because they're awesome. Like on both ends, they're great right now.
Right.
But you talk about a team that's figuring out to make it happen when they're just straight up dormant on the offensive end. I mean, that's impressive. And even Brook Lopez through a few games was I believe he's averaging the highest amount of blocks in his entire career right now. He's averaging a career high 2.6 blocks a game.
That's where I was going with it too. I think the player to highlight, not even only defensively, but offensively, Brook Lopez this year has looked like the Brook Lopez you saw when they won the championship that year and prior. Like he's looked even better. And like you said, defensively, he's took it to a whole nother level. So the Bucks, listen, until you beat the champ healthy, then I think you can give some respect there given. But listen, the Bucks to me are the clear-cut favorites, at least to win. I can understand Boston's in that conversation as well, but one thing that Milwaukee has is they just have this system, this culture that's been already there instilled for years with Giannis. So, and they have consistency at the head coach position. We'll see how Mazzulla does. I like Mazzulla a lot, but give me the Bucks, man. I mean, they look incredible, and nobody's stopping Giannis. It's not a reality.
Yep, Troy. Brook Lopez is 34 years old, and he is averaging 16 points, 2.6 blocks, 6 rebounds, 82% from the line, 50% from the field, 39% from three, and he's playing 32 minutes a game.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy too that we've seen as a veteran throughout this league. We've known of him putting up those numbers on other teams as well, but now the spotlight's on him because he's in a solid role position on a championship contending team. And then this is an exciting time for Brook Lopez in his career because he has the ability to, I think he's an underrated guy. I think he's been underrated throughout his career. So I think he has an opportunity now to really show the league once and for all, as you mentioned his age coming up, probably near retirement in the next couple of years, of who Brook Lopez is all about and who he's been really the past 10 plus years in this league.
I mean, guys, we don't talk about this enough, but there might not be a player who's changed their game more radically than Brook Lopez throughout the course of his career.
Yeah.
I mean, you see what Brook Lopez was at the beginning when he was drafted in 08, 09, he was a conventional post big.
Yeah.
All throughout his career. He would get his work done in the post and the block. He was just known for being that stable force in the interior. He didn't start attempting 3-point shots until 2016. And then when he did, he immediately started averaging 35% from beyond the arc for the rest of his career. And this is a guy that, like, we talk about all these, should he, will he segments that we do. Brook Lopez is an incredibly interesting name to throw in that conversation. I'd love to have at some point because his resume is impressive. But yeah, that's been what's incredibly impressive. And then you throw in the fact that Drew Holiday, the unsung hero, the consistent force on both ends of the court, what he is for them at all times. I mean, this truly is the perfect complementary team around Giannis. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah, they build off of his strengths, which is defensively. And on top of that, I think it's just a great fit. Like for Chris Middleton, the strengths he brings, like you said, Drew Holiday, Brook Lopez being able to space the floor, step out and hit threes. It's not surprising that he drifted the way of the league and where it was trending. He's worked on his 3-point shot because listen,
but no one did it better than him. Literally no one.
But that not only will that get you paid, but that'll elongate your career. It'll extend your career. And Brook's smart for doing that. So again, all credit to Brook. He's having a hell of a season. Like he really is. I don't think people talk about him enough. The season he's having this year at 34.
But to your point, guys, but to your point though, Jeff, how many bigs have we seen over the years
No,
try to
to
translate?
be able to, be efficient. 35% is, I mean, you'll take that.
We saw Dwight Howard try to shoot threes. We've seen Steven Adams try to shoot threes. We
Doesn't
saw
look right.
Andre Drummond try to shoot threes. Brooke Lopez went from being he attempted 0.1 attempts to the next year attempting 5 and shooting over 35%.
He could have honestly always had it too. He just didn't attempt it in the game, because to have that type of jump, you've had to have had some sort of experience in your life. Your jump shot had to have looked good, because some of these
for the here and now, we know that he is impacting this team. Like that
Yeah.
jump had significance in how it's shaping out the current team that he's on. Which
it's elongated his career radically.
Right.
Because if he would have just kept being what he was, he probably would have been out of the league 2-3 years ago.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Brooke Lopez might be playing some of the best basketball in his career, and he's not even in his prime. Like, that's the crazy thing. So it's just, they're just the stable of consistency. Another thing that's been interesting, the Cleveland Cavaliers, they started out the season red hot. Over the last 10 games, they're 5-5, and they've middled out at 10-6. And they're kind of in this slump in the conference. And that's where it's interesting, because, like, a lot of teams just aren't separating themselves. Like right now, we talked about where the West is breaking down. The Eastern Conference is also just incredibly fascinating. Another team that's lower in the standings, a team that's been, a disappointment all season, has been the Philadelphia 76ers. Obviously, it started with, they've just, it started with the injury woes of James Harden. And then over the weekend, they lost Tyrese Maxey for a month. And now Joel Embiid is going to be missing the next 2 games as well. So Joel Embiid officially will be missing Ben Simmons' on-court return to Philadelphia. But also, if he's out for some time too. Yeah. And even then, I mean, guys, let's call it the way it is. Embiid's been playing really well over the last week or so. Rest of the season, he's looked like a shell of himself. And even then, when he's been playing great and putting up good numbers, he's looked gassed. Like, he just doesn't look like he's in game shape right now.
No, he doesn't. Something's up. 76ers, whether you want to blame coaching, whatever it is, something's wrong. Whether the fit between James and Embiid. And to your point, I wanted to say this earlier about the Cavs. One thing, and we talked about this as well on the pod, because we've been predicting some of these things, crazy enough, is the Cleveland Cavaliers in their defensive deficiencies, right? Having a backcourt like that with Donovan and Darius, they're going to score a ton of points, but at times they're going to give up a ton of points. Right. So that's kind of been the balance they've needed to find in Cleveland. They got a lot of talent. They have Jared Allen. They have Evan Mobley. They have good front court guys. Kevin Love coming off the bench. But those guys in your backcourt, like, they're just defensively, it's not even a question. They're liabilities, like, as good as they are. So they have to overcompensate night in and night out offensively to be able to outscore opponents. So it's a tough one, man. It really is.
Well, the other thing too, you look at their schedule, you look at their breakdown of their wins and losses. At home, they're 6-1.
Yeah.
On the road, they're 4-5.
And there's a lot of teams like that in the league right now. We saw both conferences that are killing it at home. Even the Mavs are one of them. They're what, 8-3 at home and 1-4 on the road, right? I mean, so we can see this is a common thread throughout the league.
This is a common thread throughout the league for sure, but it's also the thing that's separating them from those top echelon
championship teams.
The Boston Celtics. They're 7-2 on the road. Part of their greatness has been how dominant they've been on the road. The Phoenix Suns last year, when they were really good, they were great on the road. And like, a lot of these teams in the Western Conference right now are atrocious, when they're not playing at home. So it's teams like, that's why, like, right now, like, teams like the Trailblazers, they look really promising, because, like, a lot of their success has been away from home. And, I think, it's not surprising that Cleveland's dealing with that early in the season, especially with the fact that they still have to develop chemistry. They're still figuring out how to play together. And I think those road losses are just symbolic of that, right? But I think, getting back to, the Philadelphia 76ers, no matter what the injury stuff is, guys, if you would have told me any point in the season beyond the first week that the Indiana Pacers are ahead of the Philadelphia 76ers in the standings, I would be concerned.
Yeah.
And we're at that point.
Yeah.
We are there. So it is a crazy time. But at the same time, I understand they've had health stuff. I understand that there's things about the way this roster is constructed where there's certain limitations. But also, guys, at a certain point, Doc Rivers is I think he's gonna lose his job this season. And
Yeah.
I think it's a matter of when. I mean, I don't think he has that locker room. I don't think they've been playing particularly inspired basketball, even when those guys have been healthy. It's just not looking great in Philly. The long-term outlook of their future success is grim.
Mm-hmm. And it's much easier to replace the head coach in situations like that. I mean,
Yep.
you're not trading Harden, you're not trading Embiid. Doc's got to go, and that's been a question mark for a couple of years now, especially in Philly with how gruesome those fans are. I mean, if you're not winning, someone has to fall on the sword, and it's probably going to be Doc Rivers. It definitely will be.
Yeah, that's one situation, Troy, where you can look and see where coaching is awry, because you can see when players aren't playing for a coach. You can see when guys aren't listening to a coach. You can see when a culture isn't where it's supposed to be, and when it's falling apart because of the coach.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, man, this is tough for me to say because I'm such a big Doc Rivers fan, but he hasn't been able to mold this roster into what we honestly are capable of knowing that they can play. Like you look at this roster and you can see championship potential. I mean, that's just there. There's no really arguing there. But when you have a guy with a talent like Embiid, and even pairing along with Harden, I know he's been hurt, past couple of weeks, but even you got your role players too, Maxey and Harris, who have shown at times that they could be, third and fourth options on championship level teams, but it's just not going well. And unfortunately, you might have to look at the coach for that, because you look at a team even like last year, like Boston, their coaching helped push them over the hump, especially against that Milwaukee series. So your coaching matters in this league. Absolutely. And when you're seeing the same story now, what are we, year 4 with this Embiid-led team? Now, I know the roster looks a lot different than it did 4 years ago, especially when you look at Ben Simmons and Jimmy Butler
But we've seen plenty of iterations of them building around Embiid at this point.
Correct. I mean, that's no secret. So what I'm getting at with it is you're on year 4 with an Embiid-oriented championship-level team, and you have not even made it to conference finals yet. Should be concerning.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm just going to say it up front. I love Embiid. I love what Embiid does, especially how good he is. But the reality is he an alpha, right? Is he a guy that's going to propel you, even with the team around him? I know they were close.
Jeff, I'll just say it for you. He's not. The answer's no.
They were close against the Raptors, right? The Kawhi, the bounce around, and all their hopes were shattered. But I'm with you, Sean. I just don't think Embiid's that dude. And Harden isn't that dude anymore. So it's a tough situation, especially look at the free agency additions. PJ Tucker, by the way, love what PJ Tucker brings, but at some point you got to take some shots. I mean, let's be honest here. You can't just be a guy running around playing,
It'd be nice if he brought points to the table, like kind of like what they were hoping he would do.
It just hasn't, and it could be coaching. I don't know, but it's been, upsetting to say the least to watch the 76ers this year. It really has.
4 points a game, 3 attempts.
Right.
PJ Tucker's not even attempting 2 3-pointers a game.
Yeah, you can't do that. You got to. I know, again, PJ's one of those guys that you don't always look at the stat sheet, see his impact, but let's be honest, guys.
That's one that sticks out in the stat sheet. Like when one of your best shooters isn't getting shots, that's a coaching problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's running track. I mean, he's just getting cardio in at this point. That's what it looks like.
Yeah, and James Harden, obviously, he looked pretty good in his first 9 games. But now with the injury, we have no clue what James Harden we're going to get when he comes back. We have no clue where this team's going to be at by then. And honestly, it could be too late. And the reality of it is, this team's not coming back better next year. Like, what's the long-term outlook of this? What are we doing here? And even then, you bring in Mike D'Antoni. You're not getting out of the first round.
No, you need a head coach that brings that accountability. I think Ime Udoka, I'm not saying he's the fix, but something that Ime did really well in Boston is for a team that didn't think that Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum could win together, and then you have Ime Udoka who holds them accountable. They take that next step. You need someone like that. I just don't think Doc's that guy. I don't think Mike D'Antoni's that guy. You need someone who's hard nosed and can tell it straight, tell it like it is.
Here's my question, Jeff. Is James Harden and Joel Embiid going to take that?
Right. Yeah, it's a good one.
It's a good question. Yeah, it's a good question. Personalities matter. I mean, Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown compared to those two, very different mindsets. So I'm with you. Honestly, at this point,
the ego of Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum is a very different thing than the ego of James Harden and Joel Embiid.
Yeah.
I mean, these are guys who I would say are the two players that care the most about individual awards in the entire NBA.
Yeah.
Make whatever, correlations with that you will. But guys, another thing that we're seeing, just talking about the injuries, we're just seeing the continuation of injuries just all throughout the league, right? Like we're seeing with obviously with the Pistons, with Cade being out indefinitely. We talked about that, a little bit earlier, but also with John Morant, in Memphis, he's going to be out at least the next 1 to 2 weeks. Lonzo Ball, as of a couple days ago, it's still come out that he isn't even running or jumping yet.
That's a shame. Yeah.
I mean, that's just dire. I mean, the things that are happening right now, like as far as injuries are always a part of the game. And it's always a shame to see how it affects teams to a certain extent. But I mean, another one, LaMelo Ball, he came back for one game and then turned his ankle and sprained his ankle in his second game.
On a fan too.
Yeah. I honestly, if you're Charlotte, why would you bring him back this season? Why would you? Realistically.
Right.
Yeah.
You shouldn't, especially with the deep draft. I mean, and you
that's a team that could use Victor Wembanyama. That is a team that should be tanking and praying for Victor, in all honesty. But I mean, yeah, the overall, I think how tight and competitive things are makes this a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Because I think now there's a ton of storylines heading into the deadline, right? Like, for example, what teams are going to buy? What teams are going to sell?
I think a lot.
Yeah.
I think a lot of teams are going to be doing both. And Bojan might come up in those talks.
I mean, listen, I think you're going to have a couple teams in each conference. The Bojan thing, that's a whole other can of worms. I personally, I don't know if the injuries change what you do with him this season. That's just me. Yeah. I don't know if the timeline changes with the Cade injury. But I do think, the Bulls, they could certainly be a seller. The Timberwolves, if things keep heading down this direction, there's already murmurs about Karl Anthony Towns potentially being the only way to turn this thing around, by the way. Did I not call that in August?
You did.
There's already murmurs about that. We're not even in December. I mean, guys, it's only a quarter of the way through. Is this not already the craziest season in the past 5 years?
Yeah.
Just with everything that's happened just in the first 2 months alone.
That's what you love about the NBA. The storylines, baby. They keep coming, it seems like, at this point.
Really. Oh my gosh. I mean, and that's not even getting into the freaking the stuff that happened at Kyrie's return.
Oh
yeah. We're not getting into that. That's a whole can of worms that we're just staying away from. That's a situation I did not expect to develop the way it did. By the way, I know I think we talked a little bit about this team last week. Did we talk about the Miami Heat at all?
We talked a little bit of how the Green Bay Packers of basketball and how they're kind of their championship contending is, going down the drain as we speak. And you also said rest in peace Kyle Lowry's career. So that was a statement you made.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like me. Upon reflection, that sounds like me. But guys, I mean, their outlook is dire. I saw reports today that Duncan Robinson is now available in trade talks. Guys, Duncan Robinson, who they signed on a 4-year, $120 million contract, is currently playing 17 minutes a game and is averaging 35% from the field and 30% from three.
Listen,
Currently, they're getting more production from Orlando Robinson than they're getting from Duncan Robinson.
There's a problem and
listen,
a half.
I always was a fan of Duncan watching him, but let's be real here. Let's be real here. He's available, but you can be single and be available.
He's available for a reason.
It doesn't mean you're going to get in a relationship. All right. So because Duncan's single and he's available, all right, that's the situation he's in. I don't think anybody's going to want that contract. That's just the reality. He doesn't bring enough production. He's a liability defensively. Honestly, good for him, though. Good for him. He got the bag. All right. You collect the bag, but that was a terrible, terrible signing. I mean, that made no sense. Why would you pay Duncan $16 million annually when you should be dedicating that money to go sign a co-star for Jimmy Butler? That's not Kyle Lowry, because he isn't that dude. He just isn't that dude.
Is the Duncan Robinson signing the worst move of Pat Riley's career?
I'm going to say it's one of the worst moves of the past 5 years as far as contract-wise in the league.
Yeah.
Because you think about it, he had an okay production definitely during the bubble, and I think that's what got him that contract.
Oh, 100% it is. He was in the bubble, he was a historic amount of productive, which is great, except there's no way he was going to be able to replicate that.
Right. And I think with that too, where we're at now with it, I mean, he's not even really a massive part of their even role or rotation. Right. Yeah. I mean, he's a guy that comes out there maybe 10 minutes a game.
He's not even a good bench player anymore.
That's the thing we talk about with Bojan. It's like, yeah, he doesn't play defense, but he overcompensates so much offensively that you have no choice but to play him. For Duncan, it's the
opposite. Yeah.
It's like both. Like he's not really, it's like he can't defend and he's not really giving you anything offensively to even be able to play him. And a city like Miami that commands you, if you can't play defense, you got to provide something. And Max Strus looks better.
Yeah.
I wonder what Max Strus's contract is. You can pull that up. My gosh.
And even then, whenever Miami was, whenever they were always like not great or middle of the pack offensively, they made up for it on the other end. They made up for it with their intensity, with heat culture, they're 14th in defense. Like they're just straight middle of the pack. They're 20th offensively. Total net rating is 23rd in the league. This team, we talked about them losing PJ Tucker and how even with the fact that they made the conference finals this last year, this was still a team coming into this year that just talent-wise was depleted compared to a lot of teams in the conference. And now it's honestly a question of if this team's going to make it to the play-in tournament.
Mm-hmm. And to Troy, and I don't know if you made this point as well, talking about them being the Green Bay Packers of the NBA right now. Similar to what the Packers expect out of Aaron, you expect Aaron to overcompensate for the lack of help.
Mm-hmm.
Father Time is undefeated. I'm not saying these guys are old and washed, but what I am saying is putting that much of a load on a guy as he's getting older, that's not the right move. And you think people would understand that. Like, just to think about that for a second. Like, for Jimmy, you'd think he needs more help. Like, the Donovan Mitchell would have been a great move. I know they couldn't get that done. They had no assets to get him. But you need Jimmy to be able to slowly, as he gets older, to kind of get some of that load off of him. But they just keep increasing it. So it's a recipe for disaster. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Bam, I listen, I like Bam, but that might be your trade piece. I'm going to be honest with you.
Right. That's a good situation.
Like, as much as everyone in Miami might like Bam, you just don't have assets. That might be your best asset. That isn't Jimmy.
But even then, how much are you getting for Bam?
That's the question.
And how much are you getting for even Tyler Hero? Like, how much would you get for him? And even then, are you thrilled with the money that you just gave him? Right? Like, there's just when I talk about future outlooks in the league that I don't like, they're among the top of the list. Because I understand, not wanting to tank and wanting to be competitive and the and the pride of consistently putting out the best roster you can each and every year. But at a certain point, when it's just not working, you gotta adjust. Do you not?
You
Good
certainly
teams do.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, Jeff.
Even Tom Gores changed his mind. Even Tom Gores said, I'm done with this. I don't know, man. There's just a lot with that. That's just a whole can of worms right there. But I'm just curious to see how things continue to develop throughout this season. You know, we've just, you know, we were talking about how right before the pod, we were talking about how each and every team has a player that makes you excited to go to the arena and watch a game. Right? Each and every team has a guy that gets you excited to show up, except the Hornets. But for the most part, like they have like each and every time when LaMelo's healthy, obviously the Hornets have that. Yeah. Obviously when he's healthy, they have that. But I mean, there's just so much box office potential throughout this entire league. There's so much, just aggressive potential and overachieving potential from a lot of teams. You know, what before we get to our last segment, Troy, the Pacers are 8-2 in their last 10. Tyrese Halliburton is playing unbelievable basketball right now. Benedict Mathurin has been a stud since day one. And even though like this team hasn't been like a powerhouse in the Eastern Conference by any means, they've had a culture of always being in the mix. Right. And with Rick Carlisle there too, I just think with that and also Halliburton blooming in year 3, I think there's a lot of reasons why this team's overachieving right now.
Yeah, there certainly is, and they're going to get another dub tonight against the Palos Magic. And I think, you spoke of Tyrese Halliburton too, but another guy, Jalen Smith, on the defensive end, been playing great too. And I think production out of him is going to be important, I think, for them because, you already know what your star and Tyrese Halliburton is going to be getting you. But another guy too, Buddy Hield. We have to understand that this guy is a walking bucket from beyond the arc, and he really has been a full career. And really to get him in that package with Halliburton when you sent Sabonis to Sacramento, I thought was a massive addition to this team. So I think the future is bright in Indianapolis, but I think they certainly have a long way to go. And there's certainly, I think you have to trade Miles Turner if you want to be in somewhat competitive championship contending mode. And you might have to throw in Buddy Hield for that too. And I know the big package and the joke that we've been talking about the past few months is sending him to LA for Russ Westbrook, but I think you can actually get that package and maybe could go desperate or maybe get some picks with those guys. So
yeah, I certainly think like Miles Turner is a guy that's going to bring like a lot of interest from teams that are looking to contend and get better. I know the other team in LA was reportedly linked to him as well. I think that'd be an interesting fit, but I think, it's kind of an interesting thing with the Pacers and with the Jazz right now, where you could kind of make the argument where you're looking at them overachieve and you're like, man, they're playing really good basketball right now. But at the same time, in the back of your head, you're like, is this good for us? Like long term?
Right.
Because like as awesome as Tyrese Halliburton's been, as backwards as it might sound, and as dumb as people might think I am because of this take, I'd rather be the Pistons at 3-15 right now than the Pacers at 9-7 because of the young talent that Detroit has, and also with where they're going to be in the lottery with what they have financially going into like the following years. Like with them, there's a long plan and a trajectory here.
Yep.
This was supposed to be year 1 of tearing things down and rebuilding. Instead, they're probably going to get another middle of the pack lottery pick, which if they do, is going to put them in the same situation they were in to begin the season. But in the same situation they were in when they traded Domantas Sabonis. Now they just have a really good guard they're wasting their career of instead of a really good forward.
Yeah, they're selling. We're in the process of buying. I think that's the difference. Like the Pacers still have some things left to sell. I think Buddy Hield. I think the development of Benedict Mathurin gives you more confidence in trading Buddy Hield.
Yep.
Getting rid of Buddy Hield, getting rid of Miles Turner. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's crazy to say that because to your point, the Pistons right now are trading anybody. There's nobody they would want to trade right now on the roster besides the veterans, besides Bojan, maybe
Yeah, like
Burke,
maybe Bojan, but like
maybe.
even and like maybe Burks, but even then, like you could argue like there's still value and
Yeah.
reason for them to be
Right.
on the roster.
And I would be in that
Right.
camp of
Right.
keeping him.
So Pistons
Yeah,
right
same.
now, yeah, plenty of look forward to.
Most certainly. I mean, guys, it's just each and every time we like come to like get to this podcast, there's always like more and more I think of, and there's like more and more things to talk about. Like we touched on the Pelicans very briefly. We could talk about them every week. Like they're
Trey
just
Murphy.
awesome.
Trey Murphy, by the way,
Mhm.
he's a hooper, man.
Yeah.
That kid he's fun to watch.
Well, I was even watching Portland a little bit earlier today, just like how much fun their lineup is to watch, like the boom potential with Anthony Simons, with Shaden Sharp. I'm excited to see what Portland looks like next year.
Yeah,
you
me
know.
too.
So, like we talked about, like before the season into the summer, I feel like we were talking about how grim their trajectory was, especially even last year. In the spring when they were just losing a ton of games, when they were just, miserable without Dame in the lineup. Now, I think this is the best team they've put around Dame. And I would argue that I think they could legitimately get to the finals if Dame plays like that guy over the stretch. Like there's a path there, unlike before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
So with that, guys, let's get to our last segment of the day. Normally we call it From Mount Rushmore, but lately we've been playing a little bit of a game, a little bit of a series called Should He, Will He? Troy, are we going back to that today?
We sure are, at least for the next 2 weeks. I would like to do that. And
heck yeah.
Today we'll be talking about 5-time NBA All-Star, one-time champion, 2011 Most Improved Player. Most importantly, my wife's all-time favorite player, Kevin Love.
Oh boy.
Should he and will he make the Hall of Fame?
Man, Kevin Love.
I'll start. I'm going to go yes and yes. You look at the stats this guy's put up, especially early in his career with Minnesota, not being able to accomplish much because it's Minnesota and they never even made a remotely effort to putting stars around him. He gets traded for the number 1 pick in 2014 with Andrew Wiggins was the pick. And then you sign LeBron that offseason and you're automatically in the finals that season. You come up short to the Warriors, and then you win the championship next year, and him being the third option, the clear-cut third option on that team, but also just the longevity of his career and how, of course, like you said, Jeff, Father Time gets the best of everyone, but he's a guy that's been consistent, and he's just been a true solid NBA player. And although, yeah, he's not an 8-time All-Star, but he's still a 5-time All-Star. And really the 2000 teens era, you could argue he's at least a top 15 player in the league.
Well, and you could also make a legitimate argument that if he didn't go to the Cleveland Cavaliers, he'd be more than a 5-time All-Star.
Right. Right.
Like you look at the legitimate sacrifices that he made when he went to Cleveland at 25 years old, which was at the apex of his career, which was the season before he got traded to Cleveland. He played 77 games, averaged 36 minutes a game. He was averaging 26 and 13, shooting 50% from the field. Like 45% from the field, 38% from 3. This guy was the best player on a Minnesota team that was sorry, but he was going out there balling each and every night. It was not his fault. They just couldn't draft at all.
Johnny Flynn, man.
That's a whole other should he, will he? That's a man. But with Kevin Love, like what he's been like, even when he, in Cleveland was that third role, it wasn't the sexy role, but he was consistent. He was productive, and he was, like when they won the championship, he was such a vital part of it. But yeah, I would say I would go yes and yes as well. I was going to try to argue no just for the sake of making this interesting. I can't. He's just too good.
Yeah, and also I think to add in there to just kind of go off your point, Sean, what he was asked to do in Cleveland. That's what I always say. What is the player asked to do? He was asked to be pretty much a spot up shooter. Like that's what his role was. Instead of in Minnesota, he was getting a ton of touches. And he started getting touches in Cleveland in the paint later on, but earlier it was just like, hey, this is how you're going to fit with LeBron. Do
Shoot
it or
the
don't.
three,
Yeah.
rebound the ball,
Yeah.
play like do the dirty work, be the Chris Bosh of this team.
Yeah, and he embraced it. And for a guy, listen, for all of Kevin Love's accolades, and the difference is, listen, you won a championship, 5-time All-Star, 2-time All-NBA. The man has 15,000 career points, 8,000 career rebounds. I'm going to go with yes and yes.
Yeah,
I like Kevin
not
Love.
a lot of people have, but go ahead. Yeah.
No, I'm all for it. Yes and yes for me, for Kevin Love.
Yeah.
Good.
And I mean, yeah, listen, when you look at everything that he's done, and you talk about like Kevin Love was really before his time because he was that beginning of the era of perimeter bigs.
Right.
Right.
Which is
like
so interesting to say before his time when he's still in the league, right?
Yeah, but like truly though, like he was the beginning of that archetype. He was the beginning of that breed. I remember watching this guy play in UCLA back when he was in college, and he just didn't make sense to watch. As like it just didn't make sense to me how good he was, And it's like I was like, there's no way he's gonna come in the NBA and do that same thing. He was awesome in the NBA all throughout his career, and even now with this Cleveland team currently, even though he's not the player that he used to be, he's this like really good sixth man now. That's like he's genuinely one of the best sixth men in the league. Like with what he brings for them off the bench. So yeah, it's one of those things where like a couple years ago, like especially like like before they drafted Evan Mobley, his future in Cleveland looked pretty grim. He didn't really care. Wasn't really a whole lot of reasons to. There's some reasons to care now.
Yeah.
And a lot to play for. So super happy for him in that regard. It's going to be really fun to watch. But gentlemen, I always love coming here and talking basketball with you guys each and every week. This is a really fun episode. Always a pleasure to be able to sit down with you guys.
Yes, sir.
Thank you all so much for joining us and being the fourth chair here at From Half Court, where we sit down and talk all things NBA basketball, Detroit Pistons, you name it, we talk about it. If you like that, be sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this with your friends. But also, we want to hear from you. We want you to join in the conversation down below. So be sure you comment your takes, comment your opinions. We would love to hear from you. But also be sure you follow us on social media so you don't miss anything that we're up to. You can follow myself at Sean Half Court, my guy Jeff at Jeff IF80, and my boy Troy at Troy Sergey 44. But with that, folks, we want to thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you guys next time from Half Court. Be sure you subscribe.